welcome in this new webinar. And we have together with us José Leon Serna from Spain. And welcome to everyone. This is a webinar about TMS WEB Core for TypeScript. So it's a new product that we are developing, and José Leon is the main architect for this product. So he's best positioned to tell you everything up into the details about TMS WEB Core for TypeScript. I will not reveal much more. I leave that honor to José. And so, José, I wish you a lot of success and go and start with revealing TMS WEB Core for TypeScript.
Okay, so thanks, Bruno. Hello, everyone. I'm going to start with a bit introduction about me. I'm going to try to keep it short. Okay, so well, my name is José León. I'm from Spain, and I was the director of engineering of Embarcadero when Embarcadero had an office in Spain, and my main duty was in RAD Studio, specifically on the IDE, but we also had the things like the RTL and all that stuff done there in Spain. So I'm specialized on IDEs. Okay, I was the creator of Delphi for PHP that was later renamed to HTML5 Builder. So I have been working with TMS for the past years, working on Visual Studio Code and enabling Visual Studio Code to be used to create TMS WEB Core applications. Okay, so Visual Studio Code is we could say at this moment is like the de facto IDE for all things web, but it's more capable than that. It's been used for many programming languages. It's open source. You can get the source if you want and compile it and modify it. You can write extensions, and this is what we are actually doing at TMS. We are creating an extension for TMS, for Visual Studio Code that enables Visual Studio Code to understand about TMS WEB Core, to have that web form designer that is able to show the controls live and to get templates and so on. Okay. So in this webinar today, what we are going to see is the result of the last year of work here at TMS, in which we are enabling Visual Studio Code to create TMS WEB Core applications, but instead using Delphi as base language, you can use TypeScript directly. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that a bit more later. Okay, but in the sense that TypeScript is like a modern language. I don't want to criticize Delphi because Delphi is my language for a long time. But there are other languages that are more used at this moment and are more suited, for example, for web development, and TypeScript is like the de facto one. Okay. So first things first is like in this introduction, this is how this extension looks. This is Visual Studio Code. Okay. And I'm putting here side by side. I'm going to be zooming in a bit so you can see. Here you have.
José, sorry to interrupt you, but I think you are sharing the wrong screen. The screen with the TMS Web Academy is what we see right now, but I would expect that we see your screen that has Visual Studio Code on it.
Yeah, we're sharing the whole screen. Let me check. Can you see it now?
Yes, now I can see it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so basically here in this screenshot, okay, you see side by side the web form designer and the TypeScript code that gets all these running. I'm going to be zooming in so you can read the code. Okay, so this is pure TypeScript, but should be familiar to you if you are a Delphi developer. For example, here you see like things like TObject, show message, TWeb button. The names for these units, weblit.forms. Okay, this should be familiar to you. This is the equivalent of the uses in Delphi. Then you see here unit, unit 1. This is like the unit declaration in Pascal. Then there is a class T41 that inherits from the web form. Then you have all the fields like web label, web edit, web button, okay? And then you have here an event handler, and is using show message in order to show a message, and using the text property of an edit. Then you have all other event handlers, etc. Okay, so that has been one of the goals of this project, is that if you are familiar and you know Delphi, you should be able to read and to be fast enough in a very short time in order to write this kind of TypeScript code. Okay, so don't be afraid of testing this product and uh, create some kind of initial application, because it's not like a total different language. And in fact, TypeScript was created by Anders Heisberg, the same creator of Delphi language. So there are many things when you write TypeScript code that you see, hey, this is exactly the same as in Delphi. Okay, so as Bruno has said, this is an entirely new product, so can be used separately from the Delphi product. If you come here in order to, hey, I just want to create TypeScript web applications, there is no need for you to know anything about Delphi if you don't want to. Okay, it's a new product, independent product. Okay, so and it's the subproduct of the D2TS project. Okay, these slides comes from the TMS training days that we performed some time ago, and that project is a project that we are working on, that the name stands from Delphi, to translate Delphi code to TypeScript code. Okay, so that's the project. Okay, and in the development of that project, what we have been doing is to translate the whole TMS WEB Core class library, or that Delphi code has been translated from Object Pascal to pure TypeScript. Okay, so, and it's readable, and we will see some of that when we get to the demo part. And the point is that we have been able, using that translator, to get working Delphi code uh, and translate it to working TypeScript code. Okay, so this is the reason why this product exists, because the TMS WEB Core class library is already translated in pure TypeScript and can be run, and can be compiled to JavaScript, and can be run in the browser, etc. Okay, so this is what allows us to create this kind of applications using RAG capabilities, which is the important thing. Is at this moment you can go to the internet, and there are tutorials in order to use React or Angular or any other kind of web framework that will allow you to create these kind of applications using TypeScript, but they don't have a RAD environment with a web form designer, and allows you this kind of interaction with event handler and so on. So this is the point, and one of the main selling points for this product, because you have that web form designer. Okay, and in terms of how this product, the TypeScript product, interacts with the Delphi Pascal based product, is could be understood if you know C++ Builder, the same way it interacts with Delphi, that you can share code, and in C++ Builder you are using the VCL that is written in Delphi. It's very, very similar. So in the end, it's about having more options. This is not about competition, and the goal of this webinar is not telling you, no, Delphi is bad, TypeScript is good. Not at all. Is you have another option with a different language to create this kind of TMS web core applications. Okay, so it's up to you, the decision that you take, whatever is best suited for you. Okay, so at this moment, and I'm talking about TMS Web Core for Visual Studio Code, that you write the code in Object Pascal. This will be more or less the current workflow when you compile an application, all the steps that are taken in order to get that Object Pascal code in something that is able to run on the browser. Okay, the first step is you get the Object Pascal code, okay? And then we are using pass2js in order to transpile that Object Pascal code to JavaScript, which is able to run on the browser, okay? And this is fine, okay? No problem with that, in the sense that it's fast, it's working properly. But the point is that this JavaScript code is not like a standard JavaScript code. It's very proprietary, I will say. It's very hard to share that code with other existing JavaScript code. It's not object-oriented JavaScript per se, okay? So it's very proprietary, but again, that is working well and is serving its purpose. But what we are doing is to move it to the next level, and the goal is to generate TypeScript, okay? So once we finish the Delphi 2 TypeScript project, this will be the workflow, okay? You get the Object Pascal that is using this translator and transpile to TypeScript that uses TSC. I'm going to explain a bit more on that, which gets the JavaScript code that runs on the browser, okay? As you see, there are more phases, but the output is better, okay? TSC is the TypeScript compiler. This comes from Microsoft and is open source. And that is the typical tool change for almost 90% of everything that is being done on the web world at this moment. There are Python and other stuff, okay? But on the JavaScript world, everyone is using TypeScript because it provides types and so on. And they are using this compiler in order to produce JavaScript which is compliant with different standards. There are many standards like ECMA, there are modules like CommonJS. It's a very complex world that we are providing you in a very easy way through our TMS tools. And the goal is that this JavaScript code, instead of the JavaScript code that is produced by pass2js, it's compliant and can be shared, can be integrated with other libraries if you want to. Okay, that's the goal of getting that code is object oriented, so you can inherit from existing classes out in the internet, which is not possible to do it with pass2js. Okay, so in the current project that we are talking about in this webinar, okay, before I was introducing you why we did this and how all this has been done. Okay, this is the current workflow. You write your code in pure TypeScript, which uses the TypeScript compiler, the existing Microsoft TypeScript compiler, open source, and you get pure JavaScript that runs on the browser. Okay, so this is the workflow that you will see that on the demonstration, and it's very simple. There are no third-party tools. There are no translators per se. Actually, TypeScript compiles a translator, but it's the industry standard for this. And whatever you write in TypeScript is going to be working anywhere because of this TypeScript compiler. Okay, so one of the things that we as developers we need to think about is the investment that we do writing code. We need to get the most of it, and the code should live as much longer as possible, because that is a big investment. So you will feel comfortable writing TypeScript code because that code could be migrated to many environments. It will run on almost anywhere. Okay, so it's a nice language to invest on. Okay. So now we are going to dive deep on what is actually TypeScript. Okay, so TypeScript is, in short, is like JavaScript with types. JavaScript, if you have done something with JavaScript in the past, there are no types. It's like a variable has not an actual declared type at compile time, but you can expect that at runtime if it's a string or a number or whatever. So what TypeScript is to add that kind of types. When you have a big application, JavaScript is nice for smaller applications, but if it grows a bit, is quite hard to maintain because the lack of types. So TypeScript is providing those types. Okay, so basically it's a superset of JavaScript. So you can add JavaScript code in a TypeScript program, but then you can add types over that JavaScript source code. Okay. And TypeScript, for the ones that you don't know about, the first release was in 2012. So it's not like the new kid on the block and the new fashion or whatever. If you jump into TypeScript development, it's a very serious project, and again, is uh, widely used in the web development industry and others, because TypeScript can be even compiled to native code, etc. Okay. And again, what I was explaining to you, it was created by Anders Heisberg. Okay, again, Delphi, Turbo Pascal, C Sharp, and now TypeScript. You will feel those similarities if when you write TypeScript code, and it will be very familiar to you. It's not languages like, I don't know, Swift and so on, that could be a bit strange. TypeScript is very familiar to existing Delphi developers. Okay. So these are some statistics about what are the languages that are being used in order to create web applications. And on top is JavaScript, because in the end, JavaScript is the code that runs in the browser. And you can see here HTML, CSS, that, you know, from my perspective, I don't think it's a language. Then you have Python, and SQL is not a language. And then you have TypeScript. Okay, this is for 2024. Okay, so again, I don't know if I can zoom in. I don't know if it was Pascal here or Delphi. I can't remember. Okay, Scobol. Oh, Delphi is here. Okay, with 1.8%. Okay, so probably that is TMS WEB Core doing its thing. But again, it's like a winning horse if you jump into TypeScript development. Okay. And why Visual Studio Code? Just remark that these capabilities, that is to create TMS WEB Core applications using TypeScript, is not available on Rad Studio. There are no plans for doing that, because Rad Studio is very nice for a language like Delphi, is ready for that. But it's very hard to add like a new language, new syntax, code inside. All those tools are very hard to add to Rad Studio, because it's not open source, and the extension system is not as powerful as Visual Studio Code. But Visual Studio Code is also written in TypeScript, and is very focused on TypeScript development. All the tools, IntelliSense, and the whole IDE is focused on TypeScript development. Okay, and again, it's open source. You can browse it and get the code and build it at github.com. Here is the repository. I'm going to click it so you can see it. Okay, and you can download it, and it has its own license and repository, and explains you how to write it. How to build it. Okay, so you're welcome to do it, because it's a very nice experience to get this kind of big project done in pure TypeScript. Visual Studio Code runs on macOS, on Windows, on Linux, even on the web. Okay, in a web browser, you can get Visual Studio Code running, because it's written using web technologies. Okay, and one of the extensions that you are going to see working while I'm doing the demonstration is GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot is using artificial intelligence in order to help you write code. Is like a body that helps you write code. You will see it, and it's very nice, because being integrated into Visual Studio Code, it knows about your project. It knows everything about the code that you are writing. And while GitHub Copilot already works for Pascal, for Delphi code, but it works much better for TypeScript. There is more TypeScript code written, so when the models are trained, have a lot more information coming from TypeScript. You will see that it's very nice to have it. And I think I look back like a year ago when I was not using it, and now I cannot get rid of it. I mean, I need it, because it speeds a lot my development. It's not like getting GitHub Copilot to write the whole code for me. It's not about that. It's like a help tool. It's like code inside on steroids. This is what I like most, because all the repetitive tasks are done by GitHub Copilot, so I can focus on what I actually want to do. Okay. And apart from that, when you create a TypeScript application that I'm going to be showing on the demo, this is based on npm. Okay, I'm going to highlight this because if you try the beta, and probably later Bruno will let you know more about that, you will need to have Node and npm on your machine. Okay, I'm going to be showing you the web pages for them, and the goal is, if you remember the old times of Delphi, almost everything that you can think of about, I don't know, reports, QR codes, everything was available through components. Okay, you just need to focus on the differential part of your application that your customer was asking, and there were different components that were providing the functionality that you needed. You didn't need to write a reporting engine, for example. Okay, so this is the same paradigm in the npm web world. There is a repository, I'm going to be browsing to it, where almost anything that you can imagine is already componentized and available for you to use. Okay, and much of that code is open source and or free. Okay, so you can use it, you can test it, and you can integrate it directly in your application using the command line. Okay, and our goal in the end is that you will be able to use TypeScript and Object Pascal at the same time on the same project. In the same way, you can use C++ Visual and Pascal code. Okay, so at this moment, npm has over 3 million packages. Of course, many of them, will be like garbage or small pieces of software or whatever. But there is a lot of code ready for you to be used. Okay, I'm going to be browsing to that repository. And for example, one of the packages that we are going to use on the demonstration today is chart.js. Okay, I'm going to be browsing to it. And this is the statistics about how much this package is downloaded every week. Okay, oh, sorry. This is 3.7 million times per week. Okay, so you can imagine how many people is using it. So you can feel confident of using this library, and will provide a lot of functionality for charting. We will see something about it, and the license is MIT. Okay, and this is the size for it. So I would like you to understand this concept because it's very important. Everything, or almost everything, that you want to do in your application is almost ready. There are packages and components ready for you to use. And now that you can write TypeScript applications directly, you can integrate them in no time, and very, very easily. I will show that on the demonstration. Okay. So next, this is also important. One of the things that or complaints that we get from when on TMS training days, talking about hiring people, younger developers. The Delphi language for this kind of developers is not something that they are being teach on the universities or colleges or whatever. And for them, it's like all the stuff. Okay, they are not eager to be hired to write Delphi code. Okay, so if you need to expand your company, it will be easier if you hire TypeScript developers. There are going to be more people with that skill, and more people eager to be hired by you in order to write TypeScript applications. Okay, because they won't identify like writing all code. Okay, this is a very important topic to think about. Okay, and finally, I think it's before the demo. Okay, I'm going to be doing a side-by-side comparison. Again, I'm going to be zooming in. Okay, this will be very familiar to you. It's a traditional unit with the uses and so on. Again, these are the uses. Okay, this is a direct translation of that. Then we have the unit, and we have the unit declaration. Then we have our type and tform class that inherits from tweb form. we have here the class tform1 that extends from tweb form. Then we have our button field, the declaration for the event handler, the button field, and here there is not like an interface and implementation section. Everything is written on the same class. There are no sections, okay? And then here we have our variable, and here we have our global variables. And the show message call and TMS WEB Core is providing these kind of functions that allow you to use the same RTL that you are used to, the same functions from sysutils system and so on. You can use them exactly on the same way, okay? So I don't know, Bruno, if we can, if you want that we, before the demo, we do some kind of questions, answers before.
Yes, sure. It's a good idea that if anyone is having a question at this time, you can use the chat. And I see, for example, already one question. Is there any training material you can recommend to start to sniff into TypeScript? Some good resource for, I think, beginner level TypeScript development.
Actually, the documentation is very, very good. Okay, there is a handbook that you can browse to it, and it contains, if you are already a developer and you know how to write code, this will be mm, the basics that you need in order to be proficient with TypeScript. Is about all the basics and how that works and so on. It's a very handbook, and then there are more other books that contain advanced topics, but this one is, of course, is free and is the actual documentation for TypeScript, and is very updated with all the changes that introduced on the language. So that is a very good starting point.
Okay. Any other question before we dive into actually building or looking at creating our first TypeScript-based applications that use the Visual Studio Code IDE with the TMS WEB Core framework? But I see no further questions at this moment. So, Jose, I think we can introduce some actual examples of how to implement um, applications with TypeScript code and the WEB Core framework.
Okay. So what we are going to do at the demo is, well, actually these palettes. The first thing is to show you how you can use Visual Studio Code to create this kind of new TypeScript applications. You will see that it's very easy. It's visual. There are wizards for that. There's no need for you to use the terminal. Okay. Then what we will do is to write some code so you feel familiar with the code that you are typing, and we will create some controls at runtime. We'll see how Copilot is working with our own code. Okay. Later, we will see how to integrate Chart.js, the library that I was showing that is available on npm.js. Okay. And after that, this is an extra point that I added on the TMS training days, because there were some guys that, hey, we are using a diagram library. They were creating a VCL Delphi application, and they wanted to know how to do something similar with this product. So the night before this demo, I was checking, and there was a library that is called AG2 that provides a diagram library, and I will show also how you can get a very simple diagram canvas where you can put stuff on it and rotate it and so on. And again, with minimal code. That's the goal. You should focus on writing the application, not the controls and the components for that. Okay. So first thing first, we are going to jump to Visual Studio Code. Okay. This is Visual Studio Code initially open with anything open, no folder or whatever. Okay. And then if you switch to the TMS commands view, you get here to the repository. Okay. And now, if you were using the Object Pascal product, now, apart from Object Pascal, you have TypeScript elements. If you click here and you switch to TypeScript, Now, because there are still two, because this is still beta, there will be more in the same way of Object Pascal is provided. You can create a new web application or a new console application. We're going to create a new TMS web application that is based on TypeScript code. Okay, so click next, and then I'm going to be choosing what folder. TS11, going to create a new one, select this folder, and initialize the Git repository. Okay, this I'm going to use these defaults, and that's it. When I click create, this is important because it's not only creating the initial files for my application, it's taking a bit because it's using npm, the node package tool, in order to install all the packages, including TMS WEB Core for TypeScript, all the packages directly from internet. Okay, that is guarantees two things. The first thing is that you get everything installed directly from the internet, and the other thing is that you are going to get the last version, the last stable version that we publish on npm. Okay, so any change, any update, any fixing, you will get it when you create new applications. There is another command that you can use in order to update your existing applications to use the latest version of that package. But again, this is based on the internet, on that package system. So you don't have to worry to get a package from the internet, installing it into your application, copy some files in some place, installing packages or rebuilding anything. All that is gone. Is a command line tool that you can use, and we are using it on our visual environment. Okay, so again, I'm going to be explaining about the files that you will get when you create a new application. First is a .vs Code folder that contains stuff for Visual Studio Code to understand this application, how to build it, how to run it. Okay, you don't need to dig into that folder, but it's nice that you know about it. Then is the node underscore modules. This is what has been installed while we were waiting for this application to be created. This is what npm does. All the packages and everything that we fetch from the internet is stored on this folder on node modules. And as you can see, it's not green because that shouldn't be committed to any repository. Okay, it's not part of your source code. Will be created or fetch again from the internet if it's needed. Okay, then it's the git ignore file to tell git to ignore this node modules folder because that is not part of your application. And this is the package JSON. This is important because a web application should have this file where you describe the name of your project, any description. If you want to publish it somewhere on npm, for example, you need to provide this application. This file, and provides what is the main entry point for the application, the scripts in order to run and build this application, and all the dependencies. And dependencies, for example, to highlight this one, this is what we have done with the transpiler. We have transpiled TMS WEB Core written in Object Pascal to TypeScript, and is available in this package, TMS software/web core. Okay. What else? This is the dprog as expected, and now we have our project one TS. Okay, this is the equivalent to the project one DPR, the project file for our Pascal application, in which you have the application, the form, the initialization, and then creates the main form, and then run the application. Okay, this is the translation to the DPR to TypeScript. Okay. Then you have tsconfig. These are parameters for the TypeScript compiler. You don't need to dig into this. Okay, this is already defined by us, but there is a lot of configurations and a lot of stuff. I'm explaining this to you so you feel how powerful and configurable is TypeScript. Okay, and then is the unit.ts. This is our equivalent to the unit1.pass. Okay, and finally the DFM. Okay, that contains, this is the DFM that you are used to in Pascal, but it's contained into a TypeScript unit, and then the HTML that will be used in order to get all the layout. Okay, and finally is the webpack config.js, which is a way to pack everything that is needed for that application to run on the browser. Again, it's a configuration file that you don't need to mess with. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is to put this side by side, even I don't have much space. Okay. So you see, when I make changes in the web form designer, how those changes are reflected into the TypeScript code. Okay. For example, if I click on a button here and I place it here on the web form designer, first has been adding the field to the class, and then the import has been added automatically. So we are getting the class from the unit where that class is located. And that is done automatically. You don't need to mess with anything. Again, this is the same way in RAS Studio, but in Visual Studio Code, you will see as we type code that is smart. Okay. And also the DFM is updated properly, including my object directly here. One of the nice things about Visual Studio Code is, for example, if I want to make changes on the DFM, I can do this, and this is a test, okay? And then all the changes that I do on the DFM are reflected on the web form designer live, okay? This is a nice thing also to have, okay? I'm going to be also adding a web panel here, okay? Again, has been added properly. And what I'm going to do is when I'm going to be double clicking here on this button, and then I'm generating an event handler in the same way you are used to in Delphi. You don't need to worry about the internals and so on. That is done for you. And what we are going to do initially, I'm going to be showing a message, and you will see when I invoke the code inside here, I get the name of the unit that is available and where that is located. And if I press tab, okay, I get the show message finalized for me. The import has been added automatically. Okay, that is important because you don't need to remember where so message was declared. I'm going to be putting this here. Okay. Visual Studio Code is smart enough to know that that function is available on web.dialogs and adds the import automatically for you. Okay. And now if I open, this is Copilot. This that is in silver here, that is offering me a hello world. This will be like the typical message. So I press tab. I'm going to be switching to the screencast mode so you see, the keystrokes and so on. Okay. So now it's time to run this application. Okay. In order to run, just switch to the run view, and then I click on running here. Okay. And this is done doing everything in the background. You don't need to worry about this. Is invoking the TypeScript compiler and packing everything that needs in order to run this application. Okay. And then I get my application in the web browser. I'm going to be zooming this in with the panel, and then this is a test, and then I get the show message of hello world. Okay. So this is, again, is very easy and very easy also to understand coming from Delphi, because the workflow for you is going to be exactly the same. Okay. So, and without stopping, and this is also important to highlight, without stopping my application, what I'm going to do is to make a modification. This is a test. Okay. Then saving, and this actually is compiling everything and reloading my browser. I'm going to be if I click here, then I get my modification and I'm not running. This is the nice thing about this workflow and this kind of web applications, that you don't need to stop your application, modify the application, run again in order to see the changes. Just make the modifications on the application, and the browser will be reloaded and your application is ready to go. Okay, the workflow doing this is very, very fast and powerful. Okay. So now what we are going to do in this button click, I'm going to be resizing this, I'm going to be hiding this, is we are going to be writing code and you are going to see how Copilot helps us in order to write that code. Okay, so the first thing is to declare a variable that is going to be named button 1. I'm going to be creating a new TWeb button. Okay, and then going to be calling the constructor using this. Okay, this will be the equivalent to call the TWeb button create and passing self. Okay, in TypeScript, this is equivalent to self. Okay, so again, I'm creating a new web button at runtime, and the owner of that web button is going to be the form, which is the this. Okay, then I'm going to let Copilot to suggest me things. Okay, it's suggesting me to place the caption to click me. I'm going to be setting the caption instead click me. I'm going to be using button 1. Okay, and then I'm going to set the align. At this moment, Copilot is this is wrong because it's offering me to set a string, and align is an enumeration. Okay, so I'm going to be fixing that myself. And then if I type align, okay, you see this code inside is working very, very good. Then t-align has been added to my import automatically. I'm going to be setting the alignment for that button to left. Okay, and I need to set the parent for the button to the web panel. Again, I'm just pressing tab a lot of times, and Copilot is able to offer me options that are very, very good. So what I'm going to do now is to create 5 buttons that will be aligned with all the alignment possibilities inside that panel. I'm going to be Copilot to show me or to offering me to do that for me. And again, has detected about button 1, and now it's offering me to create a button 2. Okay, so again, it tells me the parent, the caption, and the align, and it's telling me left, and I don't want left. So I'm going to be setting top, and I want to do it clockwise. Okay, so again, button 3, this web panel, button 3, and align right. Now this time is getting the right option. Okay, and again, another button, the parent, the caption, align bottom, and finally a new button, web panel, caption, and align client. Okay, I haven't written all that stuff. I have just instructed like the first lines, what I wanted to create, and Copilot is saving me for all the tedious work of repeating that over again, or copying and pasting and changing the caption. So if I save this, okay, I'm saving. Okay, then I click here and I get my buttons created, button 1, button 2, and so on, aligned as expected. Okay, so you have seen how to write TypeScript code, which is very easy in the sense if you know about VCL and all the class libraries, the concept are the same. And now you have seen how to use Copilot inside Visual Studio Code in order to help you do that. Okay, so I don't know if there are more questions. Let me check.
Jose, there is a question which is related to NPM, where the question is if PNPM can also be used, as supposedly NPM is taking up more space than PNPM.
We have decided to use NPM because it's like the industry standard, or is the most used. There are Yarn, and there are other, like you mentioned. So there is a lot of other packages, and this is what we generate initially. But nothing will prevent you to use another package manager because it's a TypeScript application. And again, all the files that we are generating and all that are standard. So you can use any other package manager you want. We are not interacting with NPM system and all that directly from Visual Studio Code. Okay, so we are just invoking the scripts that are in package JSON. So if you change package JSON, you will be able to use any other one. Okay.
Other question was that Thomas did not see very well how the show message was important.
Okay.
If you could maybe do that again to and maybe somewhat slower to see
Okay.
how or when exactly the show message call is imported into the unit.
Okay. Another important thing, if I don't know if it's seen, but on the webinar, but show message, because it's not used anymore because I have deleted that code. Visual Studio Code is highlighting that in a lower color. Okay. So now it's offering me is to remove it because it's not used. So I can remove it automatically. I don't even need to delete the line. So I'm hiding it. And now if I'm going to start typing the show message, okay? Show message, okay? And this option, show message, is offered me by Visual Studio Code, the code inside, because knows that is stored in TMS software slash web core slash web leak dialogues. That is also known by him, okay? And this is the declaration of the function that gets a string and returns anything. And you see here, add import from TMS web software, etc. Okay, so if I press tab, okay, then show message is finalized, but also is added automatically here on the import. Okay, this is done automatically. I have just accepted that I was going to insert show message, so Visual Studio Code added the import automatically for me. Okay. I don't know. There are more questions here.
Well, Jose, I'm not sure if in the next couple of minutes you will further explore
Yeah.
the Copilot AI.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing the chart.js integration, okay, because I think it's quite important to show that. Okay. So
Uh,
what I
Meanwhile, there was another question. In pure JavaScript, we have to add an event listener to buttons to be able to handle clicks on the buttons. Here, um, um, it's Jose Morango is not seeing where that click handler is assigned, but that is actually part of the web core framework. And Jose, I believe that basically you are doing the same as you are doing with Delphi code,
Mhm.
where you attach a Pascal handler and here a TypeScript handler to the onClick, right?
Exactly. The onClick event handler is actually a property. When the DFM is read, it's telling that that property should be assigned to web button one click, which is a function in the T-form class. Okay, so that is all done behind the scenes for you. So you don't need to add event listeners or remove. All that is hidden, and you focus on the actual code of the event handler, not how to attach an event handler. Okay. Okay, so in order to add the chart.js application, I'm going to be stopping the application and I'm going to be, this is close, yes, okay. And what I'm going to do is to use the terminal. I'm going to be closing this one. And I'm going to be getting a new terminal because I want to show you how to add these packages using the terminal. Where these packages are located, let's go to npm.js and then search for chart.js. Okay. If you see here how to install this package into my application, just copy this code, just copy it to the clipboard, and then I switch to my terminal inside my application. Just paste this, press enter. Okay, and this is fetching from the internet that package. Okay, this is the JavaScript library that I need in order to have charts into my application. And in order to get the types for TypeScript, usually what you do is to import to install the types for that library. Some libraries comes already with the types, some other don't because they are written in pure JavaScript language. So you need to import them. Okay. And what we are going to do is now check about the documentation to tell us, hey, let's see how to get started with this library. Okay, what we are told is that we are going to need a canvas. Okay, this is HTML. This is a canvas that is going to live on my web application. And then I'm going to be using this code that I get the canvas, and then I create the chart with my data, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to be copying this code. Okay, and then I'm going to be deleting all this because I don't need that anymore. Okay, I'm going to keep the button one because that is where we are going to initialize the button. I'm going to be placing here, instead a panel that I don't need anymore, I need to get a canvas. And a canvas in TMS WEB Core is a paint box. Okay, so I'm going to be placing here a paint box. Okay, now let's go to my code. This is wrong. Okay, I need to add it properly. Sorry. Okay. And then once the button is clicked, I need to tell, I'm going to paste in this code. Okay. I need to tell this code several things. Is where my chart is located, in what element ID is located. So for that, I'm going to be using this web paint box element handle ID. Okay. This is the ID for that canvas. And then chart is highlighted in red because I have not added that import. I have just pasted code. But Visual Studio Code is smart enough to tell me, hey, you have installed chart.js into using npm, so you just can add it. Okay, so this import has been added automatically for me. Okay, in my case, what I'm going to do is to add the auto, which is the one I need to use. That is different stuff. Okay, and then I get another complaint because it is telling me, hey, this element is not of the right type. Why? Because the code I was pasting, it was JavaScript code. It lacks types. So I need to do this cast. Okay, so I'm casting what I'm getting from that element. Hey, this is going to be a canvas element. Okay, and now I don't have any other errors. Okay, so I'm going to add another option that is, I think, is responsive false. As you, I would like you to check that while I'm typing code, this is helping me a lot because there is a lot of information about the TypeScript code that I'm using. Okay, so now if I run this application, okay, it's running again, it's pagging everything, and it will launch the browser for me. Okay, this is the browser. Oh. Okay, we need to check about that. Okay, if I click the button, then I'm getting my chart. Okay, the chart or inside the canvas. This is the paint box here. Okay, going to be getting more space here so you can see it. Okay, this is my application, and this is the paint box that I decided where to put my chart. Okay, so if I save this, I have done that a bit bigger. Okay, then I get my chart with the data I was using inside that canvas. Okay, I don't know anything about charting. I don't know anything how that works in JavaScript. I just got that from the internet. I got to the documentation of getting started, pasted some code, and I got my chart running. I don't know, 2 minutes. I was not checking the time for this. So this is the whole concept of web application development using TypeScript and using npm packages. There is a lot of existing code there that you can leverage into your application with minimal interaction. Okay, just installing them into your application, and that's it. Okay, so there are 5 minutes left. So if you want, I'm going to be doing the last demonstration where I get the diagram library. Okay, and then we can get some questions. Okay. Okay, so we are going to repeat the same process again, but now we are using another library, which is, let me check about the presentation, is this one, okay? 8J2, okay, this is the documentation for it. And on NPM, if we search for it, I think it's a, AJ2 diagram. Okay, is this one, Syncfusion AJ2 diagrams. Again, how to install that? Let's copy this. Okay, copy to the clipboard, and then I'm going to be killing this, and then on my terminal I paste this. Okay, diagrams library, just install it. It fetches this from the internet, and that's it. Okay, it's installed, so it's available on my application. And then how to use it? Again, let's go to the getting started. It's telling me how to install that. This is some CSS styles and so on. Okay, so how to add a diagram to the project? So what I need is basically to have a div element, which is going to be to act as a container, and then this is the code in order to create that new diagram. So in order to get a div, how to do that in TMS WEB Core? Let's get the div element. Okay, I'm going to put it here. Okay, this is the div. I'm going to be removing this because now it's not available anymore. Okay, I'm going to be deleting this code for the chart. Okay. Okay. So now let's go to the code, and I'm going to be copying this and pasting it. When I click the button, what I'm going to do is to create that new diagram. Again, it's highlighted in red. Visual Studio Code is telling me, hey, you need to add that import. So I do whatever Visual Studio Code says. And then instead, I need to tell where that diagram is going to be added. So for this is this web HTML div element handle. Okay. And that's it. So again, run my application, and let's see about the results. Okay. So initially, this is going just to show the canvas for it. Okay. Again, this is a test, and this is telling me this is a paid application. But what I'm getting here, I don't know if this is shown on the webinar, but this is like a diagram area where I can perform a selection. Okay, and all the stuff that is supposed to for this kind of surfaces. And what I'm going to do, so that is the last thing about this demonstration, is to add a new node. Okay, so I'm going to be adding a new node to that canvas. Copy this, paste this here. This is the description of the node. Again, this is red. Let's get Visual Studio Code to help. So add the import, is updating it properly. And now here, what I need to do is to add the nodes for nodes. Okay, so saving this, and once I create, then I get my node here, which is a fully functional, and this is a test, a diagram library that I can expand, I can rotate, and this is using HTML5 canvas that is, accelerated and so on. Okay. So again, what you have been doing with this is, again, it's like 2 minutes of work, and you are getting a diagram library that you can leverage to your customers and make your applications very powerful. Okay, with minimal code. Okay. So now it's time for the questions. I think we are on time, so just let me know any questions you have.
José, on code completion. So apparently, I guess that Thomas has been installing TMS WEB Core for TypeScript as we are doing this webinar live here, and where he is not seeing any code completion. He is seeing code completion for HTML tags, but not for the TypeScript code in the web core application. So I'm not sure, José, you have a quick hint for this?
That should be a default. I mean, there is nothing we do that prevents Visual Studio Code to provide the code completion for TypeScript. That is native to Visual Studio Code. So maybe we can exchange some emails offline after this webinar. Okay.
Yes, so Thomas, indeed, I guess that it will be best to follow up this privately.
Mhm.
Normally, it should work out of the box. The normal steps to do is install Visual Studio Code, install NPM, also install WEB Core for Visual Studio Code, and then install the plugin, the separate plugin to give you the TypeScript functionality in TMS WEB Core for Visual Studio Code. So that is the normal sequence of things to do. I want to add to that that currently we are in beta with TMS WEB Core for TypeScript, and if you have a active all access subscription, you should find the TMS WEB Core for TypeScript um, download on your My Products page, and you can download it from there. And then after you have installed TMS WEB Core in Visual Studio Code, you can add that additional plugin, and you should be up and running. As Jose has also demonstrated, you should have the option to select the TypeScript language in your WEB Core application, and then do all coding with TypeScript. And of course, we invite you to give your feedback, your wishes. If you encounter some difficulties or whatsoever, we are open to hear how you receive this beta, and to hear your thoughts and further shape and polish the product. I see another question here. Meanwhile, can you tell us more on the future of WebCore for Delphi in the context of the Delphi to TypeScript transpire? Jose, maybe a few words on that.
Yeah, the point of replacing Pass2JS is, I was explaining a bit that on the presentation, is to be able to interact more easily with third-party applications, and also that the code that you write is compliant with the different standards in JavaScript. So when you create a class in Pascal, that class should, or at this moment, is actually translated to a TypeScript class. And for example, if we show that, let me check, for example, WebLib forms. Okay, let's see about this code. This has been translated directly from the Pascal code. Okay, this is the form that extends from the custom form, and you have here all the properties. This is translated code that is readable. Okay, that was very important. These are published properties and so on. Okay, and again, this is the custom frame and all the alignment system and all that has been translated. And the goal is that the code that you write in Delphi gets translated to something that is more modern and more able to be cross-platform and run anywhere. Okay, so what we are working now is to embed in this translator into Visual Studio Code extension. So things like Omni Pascal, for example, that is a binary-based, a proprietary project that we are using for syntax highlighting and for error inside in Visual Studio Code, to also replace that, because in the end, Delphi 2 TypeScript is a powerful parser that gets us all the information about the Pascal code that you are writing, and allows us to all the error inside, code completion, and all those binary parts that we have at this moment, Pass2JS and Omni Pascal, that prevents TMS WEB Core for Visual Studio Code to write, for example, on the web, okay, which is a very important platform to be on, okay. So the goal is, I'm not going to give dates as always, but we are very, very close to release a beta in which you will be able to test that workflow without using Pass2JS. Okay.
Also, maybe important to add that information is the extensions that are installed in Visual Studio Code, that these extensions auto update. That means if you start with TMS WEB Core for TypeScript, which is at this moment at version 0.37, we continue to work on this extension. And if you have installed it, let's say today, and we publish a update 0.38, for example, Visual Studio Code will automatically update that. So in terms of managing the packages or extensions that you have, I think this is one less worry that Visual Studio Code is doing all that for you automatically. There is actually no work in that area to do.
Right, and also the npm package that where you have the framework. This is the package JSON that controls how that is updated. This is the signature that we are using. So if we release a new one, just perform on the terminal npm update, and you will get the latest version directly. For new projects, that is done automatically. For existing projects, you just update through npm, and you get the latest version.
And something that makes me particularly curious and also excited at the same time is the AI integration of Copilot in Visual Studio Code. José, maybe you showed a few things where Copilot, I think, did wonderful things to guess, for example, that alignment type that it should auto-magically somehow it knows that it should suggest all the options that Align offers.
Right.
But how is your daily experience? Because I believe that you are on a daily basis working in the IDE, writing the code in the IDE itself. How's your experience and how's your vision on AI for a software developer today?
Yeah, when I was showing this on the TMS training days, because there were more like live interaction with people was, hey, we are going to lose our jobs. And I don't think that at all, in the sense that these are like tools and helpers for us to write code faster. Okay, it's not about that that is going to replace developers, at least I don't think on the short term, not at all. But allows you to be more productive. Again, I'm not using very much to create big pieces of code, because I feel that the code is not as good as it can be. Okay, but there is a need of be like a human reviewing that code before adding that blindly. But it helps you a lot. I don't know, maybe iterating through arrays and all that stuff. You don't need to have all those syntax in your head, because if you even type a comment, then you are instructing Copilot what needs to be done, and then your work is to review that, okay, and to validate that, and so it saves you a lot of time. And I cannot think how to go back. I mean, sometimes I need to write Delphi code on Rad Studio, and without Copilot is I don't like to do that anymore. Okay, so just try it for yourself, and it even works with Object Pascal. So if you are a TMS WEB Core for Visual Studio Code in Object Pascal developer, you can use it as well. It works as well also, and it understands the language that you are writing in. So it's a very helper tool, and I totally recommend it. There are more options, but this is very tightly integrated with Visual Studio Code because comes from Microsoft. So there are other options, like even ChatGPT has released something that is also interacting with Visual Studio Code. But again, in the end are options, and just try whatever fits best for you.
So that means indeed that you can use TMS WEB Core for Visual Studio Code with the Object Pascal language, and also already take advantage of the Copilot AI to be more productive at writing code. Another topic, José, is I guess that a lot of us Delphi developers, we have existing code bases that we want to take to the web. And of course, these code bases are in Object Pascal. But on the other side, you show us how nice it is to have this wide access to countless useful TypeScript, JavaScript libraries. How, as a web core developer using the Object Pascal language with the Delphi to TypeScript transpiler, we could also, in an easier way than today, take advantage of these TypeScript libraries.
Yeah, the goal is with the Delphi 2TS project is like the code that we generate is going to be pure TypeScript, object-oriented TypeScript. It should be possible to interact with existing Object Pascal code bases. If you have like business rules and algorithms and so on that are not visual, that are like VCL code, that is pure non-visual code, that should be also possible to be integrated into your application. And then it's up to you to write the visual interface for it. Okay. And using Delphi 2TS, you can get the best of both worlds. It's like Object Pascal, which is the language you are familiar with, and the integration with existing NPM libraries that are ready for you to use, as I have been showing.
One more question dropped in here from José Morango asking, we didn't touch it in this session, how the debugging experience is in WEB Core for TypeScript.
You are debugging TypeScript code, okay? And this is, it comes out of the box in Visual Studio Code. So there is nothing for us to do. For Pass2JS, we needed to do stuff that is produce source maps and so on, and to interact with the debugger. In TypeScript, there is nothing for us to do. It's the same because it's TypeScript, and you can do it out of the box.
So yes, that actually already built into Visual Studio Code, and so you immediately take advantage of that in also in WEB Core for TypeScript applications.
Right.
All right. If there are no more questions, now is the time if you have any further questions to ask them. But if there are no more questions coming up, then of course I want to thank you for spending your time here with us, showing at this yet another step in exciting developments that we are doing to give you red component-based development with the TypeScript code, taking advantage of all the existing things in the TypeScript community, and do all that out of the Visual Studio Code IDE that you can run actually anywhere on a Windows machine, directly on a Mac machine, on a Linux machine, and even in the cloud. You did not touch that area too much yet, José, whether or when, for example, we can expect that we can also build WEB Core for TypeScript applications directly out of the browser in the web, so without installing anything.
That already works. I mean, because we are not using, or there is no binaries here. And for example, you can go to GitHub and press, if you have an account, press dot, and then you get Visual Studio Code on your browser, browsing the project that you have stored on GitHub, and you can edit it. All that already works. Okay, so because there are no binaries, you can do it already.
Maybe a good suggestion is and that will be, I guess, the quickest way, that we record a video where we show the experience of getting everything out of the web, and so that if you are at your friend's house, you can just go to your to the browser, and without having installed anything, you can continue to develop your applications. I think that would be exciting to see in a video. And meanwhile, another question came in, and that is with respect to licensing, where the question is, WEB Core for TypeScript, will that require a separate license? And the answer here is no. So if you have WEB Core, it will be your freedom of choice whether you develop in TypeScript or Object Pascal, or actually both. So it is all based on the same WEB Core framework, all based on the same RED integration into the Visual Studio Code IDE. It is just the language that changes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Not sure. I'm not seeing any more questions now. If you have any further last words, José, from your side.
No, I mean, the goal is, again, is to emphasize that the goal of this project was to make it easy for existing Delphi developers to use a modern language with the less of effort. Okay, so just try it, provide us with feedback, and don't fear that, hey, this is a different language, different stuff. Should be very easy for you with your existing skills. Okay, so welcome to try.
Yes, go to your account. If you have All Access My Products, you will find the extension download there. Once you have installed it, know that you will be automatically updated as we deliver new updates. And you can use our support center and also communicate with us and with fellow developers about this WEB Core for TypeScript. I see, meanwhile, further questions. I have just launched Visual Studio Code and it has updated WEB Core to version 2.68294, but TypeScript is not available, which is expected. There is a separate extension, an add-on extension that holds the TypeScript support. And so that is a separate extension that you at least need to download and install a first time. You can download it by logging into our website and going to account My Products, where you will find this extension download. And so this extension, after having it installed, will give you the option to select the TypeScript language instead of the Object Pascal language, which is the default language. And then another question is Holger working on a book for the TypeScript version? That is something that I need to discuss with Holger. At this moment, he's not writing yet. Will depend on, I guess, first of all, his workload. Secondly, to see how much interest there is in the TypeScript language. But for sure, expect more videos, more content, blog articles coming for this WEB Core for TypeScript. And of course, we from our side, we very, very, very much look forward to your feedback, because ultimately we built this for you. And so it's very important to hear how you want it to be shaped and how you see it being productive for you to build web applications in a RED component-based way with the TypeScript language. And I think very exciting is to have such a huge access to existing tools for from the TypeScript community. Okay, with I see another question every time we want to close. There is another question coming in, which is, will WEB Core be included in Smart Setup soon? The answer is yes. We are working on packing WEB Core also for Smart Setup. It takes somewhat more time than for the other products, because the installation of WEB Core itself is the most sophisticated install in our entire family of products. And that's why it takes somewhat more time. We had to do also work for the WEB Core plugin for Delphi itself to make it Smart Setup compatible. That work has already been done. If you are using 2.6, you already have the prepared web core version for Smart Setup. It's just now the last steps to pack it into Smart Setup. So yeah, we are very eager to deliver that as soon as possible, and you can expect it. And then, of course, with that, a few more things, we will have completed our transitioning to Smart Setup. And a positive feedback, more positive feedback, that Smart Setup is so great and that people love Smart Setup. That is exactly the reason why we have been working so hard and are still working hard and are actually adding even more capabilities to a Smart Setup, especially in the area of also enabling it for non-TMS packages, so that you can combine its power not only for our products, but who knows, in the future, many more Delphi projects, so that you have that experience of really, I think, seamless installs, seamless updates, that you have that for all your Delphi stuff. So watch that area, more is coming for sure. And with that, I think we have covered everything for today, Jose. I want to thank you from my side very much, not only for, I think, the magnificent work and the tremendous amount of work that went into the product so far, the exciting, innovative things that are coming from you. And I look forward to go further on this path to bring exciting things in the future.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks everyone for spending your time here. We will publish the replay for those who maybe had to leave somewhat earlier or jumped in somewhat later. Foremost, my message is play with the TypeScript extension and be in touch. We love to communicate about it, how you receive it, and how you reflect on building apps with TMS WEB Core for TypeScript. Thanks very much. Also, another thing is, if you love these webinars and you have ideas for future subjects for webinars, also feel free to let us know what you want to see covered in future webinars. So till the next webinar, and meanwhile, have a great remainder of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.